alien girl stunned to discover a human ship on radar. She believed they were only a myth, HFY. Zelira was a young cadet in the Galactic Defense Fleet, stationed on the edge of the known universe. Her species, the Hylari, were a peaceful race, excelling in diplomacy and scientific advancements. The Hylari had been part of the Galactic Council for centuries, fostering alliances and maintaining peace across star systems. But one legend had always caught Zelira's curiosity: the humans. For generations, the Hylari had heard stories of a primitive yet resourceful species from a distant planet. These stories were often dismissed as myths, concocted by ancient minds with too much imagination. Humans were said to have evolved on a hostile world, surrounded by dangers that could have wiped them out long ago. Yet, the rumors persisted, whispers of their tenacity, their ability to survive against overwhelming odds. Their nickname, the Last Warriors. Zelira, like most Hylari, thought little of the stories. After all, the galaxy was filled with countless species and races, each unique, but none like the humans. Still, she was fascinated by the tales, and she often found herself asking her instructors about them. They would only smile and tell her, "You'll never meet one. They're only stories, young cadet." But that day, everything changed. Zelira was on duty, overseeing the radar systems in the command center of the fleet's cruiser. The hum of the machinery was calming, a steady rhythm she had grown accustomed to. The stars outside the cruiser's viewport were as silent and unchanging as ever, stretching out into infinity. She had heard the stories, sure, but they were nothing more than idle curiosity at this point. That was, until the blip appeared. At first, it was small, just a faint disturbance. The system wasn't registering anything significant, but Zelira had been trained to trust her instincts. She leaned in, adjusting the filters and zooming in on the anomalous signal. Her heart skipped a beat as the blip grew larger. It wasn't a malfunction. It wasn't a glitch. The radar was picking up a ship, a human ship. Zelira's mind raced. The ship was primitive by galactic standards, built from materials that weren't even close to the alloys most species used. It was small, jagged, and rough around the edges, but it was real. The radar was showing it clear as day, moving through a sector of space that had been considered uncharted. No known species had ventured this far in generations, yet here it was. Her hands trembled as she activated the comm systems, sending out a message to the Central Command. "Commander, this is Zelira. I'm detecting an unidentified vessel. It appears to be human in origin." The reply came quickly, almost dismissively. "Zelira, stop playing games. Humans don't travel this far. It's a malfunction. You're probably picking up some ancient debris." But Zelira wasn't convinced. The data was too clear, too precise. She ran several scans, trying to find any hint of a mistake. The ship was real. It was alive. It had to be. She waited for the command to respond, but none came. Instead, her mind wandered back to the stories she'd heard, of a species so determined to survive. They would fight through the worst of circumstances, only to rise from the ashes. If this ship was indeed human, it would prove everything the Hylari had dismissed for so long. Zelira's eyes widened as she realized the implications. The human ship wasn't just a random anomaly. It was a message. Humans had made it this far, against all odds. "Commander, you need to see this," she said firmly, sending the data directly to his console. There was a pause. The commander's voice was barely audible through the comms, tinged with disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. "Prepare for a rendezvous. We'll investigate further." Zelira couldn't contain her excitement. She knew, deep down, that she was about to witness something historic. The stories of humans, those long-forgotten myths, were about to come true. As the cruiser made its way toward the human vessel, Zelira stood at the observation deck, watching the small, stubborn ship draw nearer. She couldn't help but smile to herself. The Hylari had believed the humans were just stories, but this, right here, was the proof. The humans were real. And she was about to meet them. As the ship closed in, Zelira felt a strange mixture of awe and excitement. She had heard the myths, but nothing could prepare her for the truth. She was about to see firsthand what made them the last warriors. The myths were no longer just stories. The humans had arrived. And the galaxy would never be the same. The human ship slowly grew in size on the observation deck's viewport, its jagged outline becoming clearer with every passing second. Zelira couldn't tear her eyes away from it. It looked like something out of a forgotten age, built with crude materials, bare metal, scraped and dented, nothing like the sleek ships of the Galactic Council or the polished vessels of her fellow species. As the human vessel closed the distance, Zelira's mind was a storm of questions. How had they made it this far? Was it a reconnaissance mission? Were they lost? Or had they intended to explore? Before she could contemplate further, the comms system buzzed to life. "Zelira, prepare to initiate communication," came the commander's voice. "We'll try to make contact with them. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary." Zelira nodded, her heart racing. She was no stranger to diplomacy, but this felt different. This wasn't just another alien race. They had only ever heard stories about humans, and now one of them was right in front of her. The human ship finally came within range, and she could see the damage it had endured. Its hull was battered, patched together in places with what appeared to be scrap metal. It looked like a ship that had survived 1,000 battles, each scar telling a tale of struggle, resilience, and sheer will to continue. "Commander, the vessel is hailing us," came the voice of the communications officer. "I'm patching it through now." The screen blinked to life, and Zelira saw a face appear, a human face, with rough, unshaven skin and eyes that held a fire she had only heard about in stories. The human before her was older than she expected, his expression stern but with a glimmer of something determined. He was wearing a simple suit, much like the kind used by those in deep space exploration. His voice came through, rough and weathered. "This is Captain Elias Kane of the human vessel Perseverance. We request assistance. We are low on power and supplies. We have been traveling for years. I repeat, we require assistance." Zelira's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a desperate plea, no. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with unyielding determination. This wasn't the frightened message of a lost crew begging for rescue. It was a demand from one of the last warriors of humanity, surviving against all odds. Before she could respond, the commander's voice cut in, stern and official. "This is Commander Rylak of the Galactic Defense Fleet. You are far outside the bounds of known space. How did you come to be so far from your homeworld?" Elias Kane's face remained impassive, though his eyes never wavered. "We've been traveling, searching. We've had to survive. We're a species built on fighting, and we'll never stop fighting until we can find a place we can finally call home again. My crew and I, we're the last of us. The rest of humanity is scattered, lost, or gone. I know we're a long way from Earth, but we're still here, and we need your help." Zelira's mind reeled. Lost? Scattered? Gone? These words struck her like lightning, and she could hardly process the gravity of what the captain was saying. The human race was nearly extinct? Her training had always taught her that survival was the ultimate goal, that each species should seek peace and preservation. But this was something beyond survival. This was defiance in its purest form. Her hand trembled slightly as she spoke into the comms. "Captain Kane, this is Zelira of the Hylary Fleet. I will assist you. You've made it farther than any species could have dreamed. We'll provide you with resources, and we can escort you to a nearby station for repairs." Elias studied her for a moment before nodding. "Thank you," he said, his voice softened, but with the steel that only a human could carry. "We've made it this far. We won't give up now." Zelira's heart swelled with a mix of awe and something else, a sense of shared strength. These humans, against every odd, against the vastness of the universe, had fought through to this point. They had never given up, even when the rest of the galaxy had all but written them off. And here they were, alive, surviving, proving every myth wrong. Zelira glanced toward the commander, whose usual cold demeanor had thawed. Though he remained stoic, she could see the realization in his eyes. The humans weren't just a myth anymore. They were here. They were real. And in their resilience, they embodied something that even the most advanced species, like the Hylary, had lost over time, the unbreakable will to survive and fight. The ship began its approach toward the fleet cruiser, its battered hull gleaming under the stars. Zelira turned back to the screen, locking eyes with Captain Kane once more. "We'll help you," she said firmly, "and we'll make sure the galaxy knows what you've accomplished. You're no myth. You're humanity." And you've proven what it means to be the last warriors. Elias gave a faint smile, one full of weary pride. We'll never stop fighting, Zalira. Never. As the human ship docked with the fleet cruiser, Zalira stood at the viewport once more. She could feel the weight of history settling in the air. The myths of the humans were no longer just stories, they were a living, breathing testament to the strength of survival. And Zalira, along with the rest of the galaxy, would now learn that humanity was more than just a myth. They were a force to be reckoned with. The last warriors had arrived. As the Perseverance docked alongside the cruiser, Zalira's excitement grew, tempered with a sense of reverence. She stood in the command center, her eyes never straying from the viewport, watching as the human ship, a battered testament to their struggle, settled into place. There was something almost sacred about the way it floated, not like a ship at all, but like a living being that had endured the weight of every star and every storm the universe had thrown at it. Zalira, the commander's voice broke through her thoughts, stern as ever. Get to the docking bay. We need to ensure the transfer goes smoothly. These humans may be unorthodox, but we can't afford to make any mistakes. Zalira nodded, her thoughts still racing. As she made her way to the docking bay, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a routine mission. She wasn't merely escorting survivors or making another diplomatic exchange. No, this was something deeper. She could feel it in her bones. When the bay doors opened, the first thing she saw was the human captain, Elias Kane, stepping onto the platform. His crew followed him, all of them looking weary, their clothes and faces marked by long exposure to the harshness of deep space. They looked like they'd been through 1,000 battles, each of them holding the same quiet strength that Zalira had sensed in the captain's eyes. Elias stepped forward, offering a hand to Zalira. His grip was firm, like a promise that the fight was never over. Zalira, he said, his voice low and steady. I've heard stories about your people. You helped bring peace to the galaxy. That's something we could never have done on our own. I never thought we'd meet, let alone this. Zalira shook his hand, feeling a strange rush of pride for her people and a quiet sorrow for the human race. We never expected to meet humans either, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. But you've proved something that I think the entire galaxy has forgotten, that survival is more than just living. It's about fighting for what you believe in, even when everything seems lost. Elias gave a tight smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. We've had to fight for everything we have, and we're not done yet. Zalira turned to the group of humans standing behind him. There was something powerful about their unity, something that transcended species and technology. They had endured an unimaginable journey to get here, each one carrying the weight of their fallen comrades, their lost world. You're welcome here, Zalira said, her voice resolute. We'll help you get back on your feet. I can promise you that. But in return, we need to know everything. How did you survive? How did you make it so far from your home? The humans exchanged looks, some of them nodding as if to say it's time. Elias stepped forward again, his gaze hardening as he spoke. We didn't survive because of advanced technology. We didn't survive because we had the best weapons or the strongest ships. We survived because we never gave up on each other. Because every single human aboard this ship, every one of us, has the same drive to keep fighting. We've faced the collapse of our world, the death of billions, and the loss of all we knew. But we didn't give up, and that's what makes us human. We fight, we endure, and we rebuild. Zalira felt her heart race. The raw emotion in Elias's words hit her harder than she expected. She had heard stories of human determination, but hearing it spoken aloud, seeing it reflected in their eyes, made the legend real. She realized just how much humanity had suffered, and just how much they had triumphed. As the humans settled into the cruiser, Zalira led Elias and his crew to the fleet's command center, where they would discuss the terms of their alliance. The commander, though still guarded, seemed to soften in the presence of the humans, their strength undeniable. We have plenty of resources to offer you, Zalira said as they gathered around the table. But we must also understand what drives your people. We can't offer help unless we understand why you've come this far. Elias leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with focus. We came because we had no choice, he said simply. Our world was lost to us. The Earth. It was consumed by war, disease, and environmental collapse. We scattered to the stars in search of something, anything, that would give us hope. But all we've found are more dead worlds. Our people are lost, and we're just trying to survive. Zelira's heart clenched. She had never imagined humanity's history to be so tragic. But as Elias spoke, she saw something that gave her hope, something that stirred her soul. "You didn't just come to survive," Zelira said, her voice trembling with newfound conviction. "You came to rebuild, to fight for a future, for your people." Elias nodded, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "Yes, and we'll do whatever it takes to rebuild, to find a place where we can grow again. We may be the last of our kind, but we will fight, and we will live." Zelira stood in silence for a moment, taking in the enormity of the situation. These humans weren't just survivors, they were warriors. Their journey wasn't just about escaping the past. It was about building a new future. "You're not alone anymore," Zelira said quietly, but with great certainty. "The galaxy will stand with you. We will help you rebuild, but you must promise me one thing." Elias looked up, his eyes filled with the quiet strength she had seen in him from the start. "Anything. You must never stop fighting," she said, her voice unwavering. "The galaxy needs your courage. We all need to remember what it means to fight, to survive." Elias's eyes softened, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "We'll never stop fighting, Zelira. I promise you that." And so, Zelira knew in that moment, the myths had been true. Humans weren't just survivors, they were the last warriors, and their fight was only just beginning. Together, they would rebuild, and together, they would show the galaxy that even in the face of impossible odds, the spirit of humanity would never be extinguished. As days passed, Zelira and the human crew began to work side by side, sharing knowledge, resources, and strategies. The cruiser's corridors were filled with a new energy, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. The humans, though worn and weary, brought something that the Hylary hadn't seen in years, a spark of defiance, a refusal to succumb to fate. Their resilience was contagious, infecting even the most stoic of Hylary officers. Zelira often found herself in deep conversations with Elias, learning more about humanity's history, their losses, and their unyielding spirit. She discovered that they had once been a race of explorers, artists, and inventors. Their technology had been ahead of many species, and their culture rich with diversity and creativity. But all of that had been torn apart by war, environmental disasters, and the slow collapse of their civilization. "What happened to Earth?" Zelira asked one evening as they sat in the observation room, looking out at the stars. Elias' eyes darkened as he gazed out at the void, his expression distant. "It was a slow death. The Earth's climate changed. Wars raged between the nations. Then the diseases came, and famine. By the time we realized it was too late, the planet was already dying. We scattered to the stars, hoping to find refuge. But we haven't found it yet." Zelira's heart ached as she listened, feeling the weight of their tragedy settle over her. The Hylary had never faced such a cataclysm, and the thought of a species losing their home planet, losing everything, was unimaginable. "And now?" Zelira asked softly. "Now," Elias said, his voice firm, "we fight, we rebuild. It's what we do. We may be scattered, but we're still alive, and as long as we're alive, there's hope." Zelira nodded, deeply moved by his words. She had never encountered a species so driven by the need to survive, to continue, no matter the cost. It was a kind of strength the galaxy had almost forgotten. But the work wasn't easy. The Perseverance was in dire need of repairs, and the humans had limited resources. The Hylary offered what they could, but they too had their limits. Yet, day by day, Zelira watched as the humans rebuilt their ship, not just with parts but with sheer determination. They didn't wait for help, they adapted, using whatever they could find, patching and welding together a future that seemed almost impossible. Zelira couldn't help but be impressed by the way they approached every obstacle, with no hesitation and no complaints. There was no doubt in their minds that they would succeed. Every setback only fueled their resolve. One morning, a transmission came through from the human vessel's main engineer, a woman named Captain Mira. She had been working tirelessly to restore their power systems, and now, after days of relentless work, she had news. "Zelira," Myra's voice crackled over the comms. "We've managed to restore full power. We've got shields back online, and our engine systems are running at 85%. We're almost ready to depart. Zelira's heart lifted. That's incredible. Mira, you've done it. We've done it together. Mira replied, her voice filled with pride. The crew has been working non-stop, and we've learned a lot from you. Your technology, your systems, they've helped us more than you know. But we're not done yet. We still need to find a new home, a place where we can start again. Zelira stood in front of the view screen, her gaze fixed on the human ship, which had been transformed from a crumbling hulk into something almost alive. She could see the difference in the faces of the human crew. They were no longer just survivors, they were fighters, builders, and dreamers once again, and they had hope. We'll help you find that place, Zelira said, her voice resolute. We'll help you find a new home. Elias had once told her that the galaxy would never understand humanity's fight, their need to survive and rebuild. But Zelira was starting to understand. Humans didn't just survive to exist, they survived because they refused to give up on what was worth fighting for, each other, their future, their very essence. As the Perseverance prepared to leave the cruiser, Zelira stood at the docking bay, watching as the ship's engines powered up. The humans had done it. They had rebuilt, not just their ship, but their will to live, and now, they were ready to venture out into the stars again. Zelira, Elias called, his voice strong and steady. He stood at the threshold of the airlock, his crew behind him. We may have come here looking for answers, but what we've found is a new beginning. You've given us more than resources. You've given us something that the galaxy had forgotten about, the courage to keep going. Zelira smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride swell within her. It was you, Elias, you and your crew. You're the ones who reminded us all that there is always something worth fighting for. Elias nodded, his face softening. I think we all needed that reminder. But the fight isn't over yet. We've got a long way to go. And if we're going to rebuild humanity, we need to keep our strength and our spirit. Zelira extended her hand to him once more. Then let's do it together. No one should fight alone. Elias grasped her hand firmly, a look of understanding passing between them. Together. Then, as the human ship drifted away, slowly moving toward the unknown, Zelira watched, her heart full of hope. The humans were no longer a myth, they were real. They were survivors, and the galaxy, for all its vastness and uncertainty, had found something rare, a species willing to endure, to fight, and to rebuild. For the first time in a long time, Zelira felt the stirrings of something greater than just peace. She felt the stirrings of a new era, a future where species, no matter how different, could stand side by side and fight for something bigger than themselves. The last warriors had arrived. And together, they would forge a new destiny. As the Perseverance ventured further into the unknown, Zelira couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and they had just begun to scratch the surface of what it meant to truly rebuild, to forge new bonds across species, and to heal the wounds left by centuries of conflict and isolation. The humans, though weary, seemed to have an unshakable drive, one that was contagious in its own right. Zelira found herself visiting the human crew frequently, her fascination growing with every conversation. The way they spoke about their past, about Earth, was not filled with bitterness, but with a quiet resolve. They didn't speak of the destruction with anger, but with determination to honor the memory of those lost by never forgetting the value of survival. One day, as Zelira sat with Elias and Mira in the observation deck, watching the stars drift by, a new discussion began to unfold. The humans had gathered data during their travels, data on star systems, planets, and potential new homes for their people. We've been scanning nearby systems, Elias began, leaning over the table where a holographic map of the galaxy hovered. There's a planet, a few hundred light-years away. It's habitable, but just barely. The atmosphere is unstable, and the resources are scarce. But it could be a starting point for us. We could make it work. Zelira studied the map, her eyes narrowing. It's a dangerous venture. Even with your resilience, the challenges could be overwhelming. You'd need supplies, a stable infrastructure? Mira cut in, her voice as steady as ever. We know the risks, but we've been through worse, and the thing is, we don't have a choice anymore. We have to make a stand. If we don't try now, there may never be another opportunity. Zelira's gaze shifted to Elias, who was watching her with quiet intensity. She saw the fire in his eyes, The same unyielding spirit that had burned in him when they first met. He wasn't asking for sympathy or pity. He was asking for a chance. A chance to fight, to rebuild, to live. And that, Zalaira realized, was what made humanity so dangerous and so inspiring. "We'll help you," Zalaira said at last, her voice filled with certainty. "We'll send a fleet to assist with the logistics. You're not alone in this." Elias nodded, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "We've never been afraid to face the unknown, but we're grateful for the help. We might be the last of our kind, but that doesn't mean we can't make something new." The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. The Hylary fleet mobilized, preparing resources and crews for the journey. Zalaira found herself coordinating with the humans in ways she never expected. There was a mutual respect, born out of necessity and admiration for the other's resilience. The lines between the two species began to blur as they worked together to prepare for the long journey ahead. It wasn't just about the destination anymore, it was about the journey itself. And through that journey, both the Hylary and the humans were learning something important, that survival wasn't enough. Rebuilding, forging new ties, and creating something lasting required more than just strength. It required unity, vision, and, above all, hope. The fleet was ready. It was time to leave the safety of the known galaxy and venture toward the uncertain future that awaited them. Zalaira stood at the command center, watching as the ships prepared to depart. There was no turning back now. As the Perseverance and its human crew took their place at the front of the convoy, Elias and Zalaira exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. This was no longer just about helping the humans survive. This was about creating a future where both species could thrive. "Zalaira," Elias said, his voice steady, "I never thought I'd find this partnership. I thought we were on our own. But now, I know we're not." Zalaira smiled, a spark of something deep inside her igniting. "We never are. Not when we fight together." With that, the fleet began its journey. The stars stretched out before them, an infinite expanse of possibility, filled with unknowns and dangers. But now, Zalaira understood something important. The unknown wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. As the convoy moved deeper into the unknown galaxy, Zalaira knew that the future was not something that could be predicted. But one thing was certain, whatever came next, the humans and the Hylary would face it together. For the first time in a long time, the galaxy felt full of possibility. And the last warriors, united, would show the stars what it truly meant to rebuild. The journey was long, and the days blurred into each other as the fleet made its way toward the distant, uncertain planet. The convoy moved through the vastness of space, each ship a small but determined speck against the infinite backdrop of stars. In the midst of it all, Zalaira had come to understand just how far-reaching the human spirit could be. They were a force, yes, but they were more than that. They were the embodiment of everything the galaxy had lost, and everything it could still hope to rebuild. In the quiet moments, Zalaira would often find herself alongside Elias, Mira, and the other members of the human crew. The conversations ranged from technical discussions on fleet coordination to quieter, more personal exchanges. One evening, as the stars flickered outside the observation window, Zalaira found herself standing beside Elias, looking out at the endless black. "You know," Zalaira said, her voice almost a whisper, "I've spent so much of my life focused on the future, on what can be, what we can build, what we can conquer. But I've never really thought about what it takes to survive, really survive, when everything is gone." Elias looked at her, his gaze steady. "Surviving is easy. Anyone can survive when they have something to lose. It's rebuilding. That's the real challenge. And rebuilding means looking forward, not back. You can't live in the past. You can only honor it and keep moving." Zalaira nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of his words. She had always thought of herself as a forward thinker, a person focused on progress and peace. But there was something about the way Elias spoke that made her realize the depth of the human experience, how much of it was shaped by loss, and yet how that same loss could create something greater. In the following days, as the convoy neared the planet they had set their sights on, the mood shifted. There was a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The planet, though habitable, had its risks, and the journey itself had taken its toll. Ships were strained. Resources were running low, and no one knew exactly what they would find when they arrived. But the humans were undeterred. They had been through worse. On the day of arrival, the first view of the planet was a striking one. From space, it looked like a paradise, vast oceans, sprawling landmasses, and an atmosphere that seemed ideal for human life. But it was far from perfect. As the fleet descended, scanners picked up pockets of instability, violent weather patterns, unstable tectonic activity, and a lack of infrastructure for sustaining life in the long term. The humans didn't hesitate. The decision was made quickly. They would land and begin the process of establishing a foothold, no matter the risks. Zalaira and her fleet joined them in the effort. The Hylary provided resources and technology that allowed the humans to make the most of the planet's resources. But it was clear that this would be no easy task. The planet wasn't just waiting to be settled, it was going to test every ounce of their resilience. As weeks turned into months, Zalaira found herself in a new kind of partnership with the humans. It wasn't just about technology or military support anymore. It was about shared sacrifice, about building something together from the ground up. They worked side by side to construct habitats, repair equipment, and develop ways to stabilize the planet's weather systems. Every step forward was a hard-fought victory, but the humans never wavered. One day, as Zalaira watched a small human child play in the makeshift settlement, she realized that this moment was more than just the survival of a species. It was the beginning of something else, something deeper. The humans were creating life again, from nothing. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to create something worth living for. The humans were not simply a myth anymore. They were the living proof that even in the darkest moments, when everything seems lost, life finds a way to persist, to fight, and to rebuild. It wasn't long before other species began to notice the humans' efforts. The Hylary, once hesitant to engage with humanity, now saw the humans not just as survivors but as leaders. They were showing the galaxy what it meant to never stop fighting, never stop moving forward, and never stop believing in the possibility of a future. Zalaira's thoughts were interrupted when Elias approached her, a grin on his face. He had changed over the months. The weariness of the past seemed to be fading, replaced by something more. The determination to rebuild had taken root in his eyes, and it was clear that this was a man who had found a new purpose. "We've made a lot of progress," he said, his voice steady but full of satisfaction. "The first colony is nearly ready for settlers. We've established a communications relay, and we're starting to see signs of stability." Zalaira nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride for the humans and the work they had done. "It's incredible what you've accomplished. You've not only survived, you've laid the groundwork for a new future." Elias looked out at the horizon, his expression thoughtful. "It's just the beginning. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we're not alone anymore, and that changes everything." Zalaira smiled, her heart full. "No, you're not alone. We're in this together. The galaxy will know what it means to rebuild, and they'll know that humanity was the spark that lit the fire." As they stood together, watching the new settlement rise from the barren land, Zalaira felt a deep sense of hope. She knew there would be struggles ahead. No journey of such magnitude ever came without its obstacles. But she also knew this: the galaxy had been changed. The myth of humanity was no longer just a story, it was a living, breathing testament to what it meant to fight, to survive, and to rebuild. Together, humanity and the Hylary had proven something that could never be taken away, that the spirit of life, of hope, was eternal. And as the first colony took shape, Zalaira knew that the galaxy had just witnessed the rebirth of a species, and the start of a new era.